Thank you. So we're going to talk about sports science today, and mainly the brain-body connection. So one of the things I want to get across is, sports science is a new term that's coming up, an old term, again, coming new, but what it is and what it's not, and there's a lot of things going on. So technology today has been great. We can monitor people from remote places. We have all these things we can look at. But the problem is that's what the coaches and even from my standpoint, commanders, they just look at technology. But there's a lot more to it. And I kind of want to address that, because what are we really looking at when we're monitoring these athletes? So one of the main things that we have is we're looking at that brain-body connection. So we talk about, mind, body, spirit, and forever that's been a term used. And I guaranteed every one of you in here believe in that, but we have a tough time implementing that. We'll spend time on the body, we'll spend time on the mind, and spiritual, whether it's faith or any type of thing that you're looking at, what drives you, but integrating into one thing and how it interacts with the other. That's where, as an industry, we've been lacking. How do we articulate that to our athletes? So one of the things that we look at in that brain-body axis is a term called interoception. So basically, we're looking at how we view ourselves. How's the brain taking that litmus test, evaluating things? So right now, if I say, well, everybody can feel their big toe, all of a sudden you guys are, bang, I hit my big toe. So now we have an internal mechanism going on, so that's interoception. How many people can sometimes hear their heartbeat? All right, that's interoception. So it's being one with yourself. Now, there are certain things that can go along with that. If people have high anxiety, things like that, all of a sudden, that stimuli, all those messages come through, and we start dealing with that. So there's a cascading effect as we go down. But we must understand that the brain drives everything, right? The brain is a very selfish organ of the body. So its main job is to protect itself, right? And we know that by, if you go into shock, what's it doing? Cutting blood off every place else, sending it to the brain, right? So that drives things, but the reverse is true. Okay, we can have afferent, efferent messaging going across. So with that, it's how are we processing all that information? So why I'm talking about this is, again, going back to that monitoring, what are we monitoring? So if we're monitoring heart rate or heart rate variability, what does that really mean? Okay, and so understanding this whole cascade, this connection is important, because that's how you're articulating the importance of what you're looking at and interpreting that data to the end user, whether it's a coach, commander, athlete, whoever. So when we look at that, you're looking at what's the body trying to do, get to homeostasis. We know that. But the problem is, what is homeostasis? And in some of the talks earlier, I've heard people talk about, we tend to set a new norm. So, if we're stressed, chronic stress, at what point do we become immune to that? Well, we don't. Okay? So with monitoring, people will say, well, hey, the technology says that you're not good, but I feel great. Well, they've set a new norm, a new homeostasis, and that's what they're trying to get back to. So sometimes we have to manipulate that to get back to a more optimal homeostasis. So in the tactical setting, whether it's police, fire, rescue, or military, the culture set a new norm. All right, the stress of the job, the hours, the environment, but that doesn't mean it's optimal. So one thing we're looking at is, how do we get that back to an optimal form of functioning? So we know this axis has a lot of influence on the autonomic nervous system and the regulation. So that affects what? Our immune system, our immune function, right? But it also affects on how we respond, our hormonal, all that cascading effect, the endocrine system, and things like that. So that's what when we're monitoring people, whether it's through heart rate or respiration, all those things tie in, and that's what we're looking at. So how it works is you have a nerve that's going down the center, okay, the vagus nerve, and people probably heard the term vagal tone, cardiac tone. Well, that's that vagus nerve, and it's got a dorsal and a ventral system, so efferent, afferent messaging going across, so up and down. So anything that's happening outside, the stimulus outside, or something inside, you get punched in the stomach or something like that, or you're sick. So it can send messages both ways. So with that, what we have is we have a response to that, right? So we can have a sympathetic response, which is our fight or flight or freeze. Okay, we always forget to add that one in, all right? Just look at the deer, all right? And so those things are important. So in a tactical setting, you know, you can have, you know, people like say the fight or flight, you stress, but that freeze one can be a millisecond, and that can be critical, okay? If you hesitate just a moment. That's all operating through this brain-body axis. All those responses, your heart rate response, even all your, most of your organ response, even acid released in the stomach, okay? So all those things are happening through that system. So one of the things that we look at is, okay, how do we calm that down? All right, so, you know, deep belly breathing is one method, meditation, so forth. Again, that's interoception, bringing that in and trying to reverse the physiological effects. So once you can understand the cascading effects, then when you're looking at the data, which we'll go on a little bit later, and seeing what that stuff really means to us and what can we take from it and what we don't want to mislead people with. Okay, so basically, you know, it's a function that's happening, you know, at the insular cortex, and it's processing all the internal organs and what's happening. So if your heartbeat is racing because I ran, what's going to happen? It's going to say, oh, we need to do this. You know, our blood pressure's up. We need to bring it down. It's going to release, you know, a cascade of hormones. Okay, and then the other part that we have to worry about is what we're ingesting in does affect that. So diet is a factor in how we can respond to that. Okay, so again, understanding diet really comes back to this brain-body axis. Okay, that brain-body connection. Excuse me. So here's the real thing. So this comes with pain, stress, anger, everything. It's all perception, right? What we're perceiving. And people have probably heard the term, we see with our brain, not our eyes. Okay? So your eyes are just a vehicle to bring in that visual stimulus into the brain. So, you know, in a very broad stroke here, when you're looking, and everybody's looking up here, and then you're seeing, okay, there's a clear picture if you don't need glasses, but, you know, clear picture. But really, it's not a clear picture. You have all these spots, these holes, and your brain is processing if this, then that, based on experience. So it's perceived something before, so it's filling in the picture, okay? So that's our blind spots. We don't see our blind spots because the brain takes over. So how many people are law enforcement here? Okay, so it comes down to a witness statement. Okay, and then with that witness statement, how many times is that incorrect? They thought they saw something, and they're convinced. And then you show them a video after. I mean, there's been studies on this, and it's like, you watch the whole thing, and, you know, you swore this shirt was red, and here it is green, you know. And those things are happening, so it's perception. How do we perceive things? Well, that's the same with threat, okay? Now, the brain, again, is a selfish organ, right? So when we're looking at that, what comes in, basically if you fall down or you get a car accident, especially car accidents, people complain about one thing, and later on they had two other things wrong with them that were pretty significant, but they didn't feel that pain because the brain said, hey, my biggest threat is X. That's what I'm dealing with. They don't feel the other pain. Okay, again, so pain becomes a perception. Now there's a real physiological effect, so we don't want to say it's all in your head. However, it is. So how you perceive that, and that's how they develop pain management things on changing that perception. But based on that, there's a there's a physiological effect with that and ramifications. So second and third order effects. So no matter what the sensory input is, it's gonna respond a certain way. So when you're looking at like let's say the environmental, so be hot, cold, how we're gonna do that. If it's really hot, I'm overheating. You can control that physiology. You can slow it down. I mean, if it's 120 degrees out, it's 120 degrees out. You're not gonna make yourself feel like you're sub-zero unless you're one of those monks. But for the most part, you can control that. You can delay that. So when you look at a military population that are in austere environments for long periods of time, that's what they're doing. Okay, they're getting their mindset so they have a different perception of what is really going on to help control that. Okay, it's not a false sense, but they can control that physiology. Once we can get our athletes to understand they control their physiology, it's easier for them to deal with those stressors, whether it's the chronic stress of the job, physical stress, emotional stress, whatever it is, you can control that physiology. So just a little bit on the ANS system. I'm not going to go too deep in it, but again, we have the parasympathetic and sympathetic system. One is more relaxed, the other one's more stressed. However, they both are working. Okay, we tend to kind of get this too simplified. It's actually pretty complex, and you'll see when we look at HRV a little bit, but with that, it's affecting a lot of your major organs, and then some other ones too. But right down to your intestines. So that vagus nerve will bifurcate inside the lining of the stomach. So then people will say, "Oh, you're not having a heart attack; you just have indigestion." Okay, well, why they have pain like they're having a heart attack? Because it's sending a signal through that vagus nerve saying, "Hey, we got something wrong." So all of a sudden now it's going over to the heart, hitting the SA node, speeding up the heartbeat, and then you feel this pain. Well, the pain's over here, even though it's here, because the brain is shifting things. And it's like, hey, I got a serious situation. I need to deal with it. So that's why you have that false heart attack symptoms. Okay, but again, that we can control some of that. Okay, and then the other thing too is, and we'll go into it, but the balance of the sympathetic parasympathetic, and it's really not the balance; it's the blend. Okay, because you're not going to have a 50-50. You don't want a 50-50. Okay, so when we're looking at all this data, and this is going to be just a brief thing on electrophysiology, because I am not an electrophysiologist by any stretch of the imagination. However, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a QRS complex. Okay, to get HRV, you need this. So all the devices that, and we can, you have them on your phone, you can do HRV on your phone using the camera. It doesn't have this, it's not HRV. Okay, heart rate variability needs this complex, and we'll go into that. But the complex, and you can see each segment there. Okay, so there's a reason why we need this complex. Now, if it's just HRV, we're looking at just the R to R segment. Okay, but along with that, if we can really look at the EKG readings, we can look at, when you look at the RS segment, that length, if it gets longer, that's a sign of immune dysfunction. Okay, now that's not HRV. So some of these technologies will say, hey, with the HRV, you can also look at when you're getting sick. Not really, but the ECG or the EKG strip, we could, because we're looking at the RS segment. So I bring this up because I want you to understand the complexity that goes behind this. It's not just a number. So it's telling us different things. Any questions up to now? Because I'm going to get into the HRV stuff. It's pretty boring, right? Now we'll get into the HRV. So what HRV really is. So again, it's a litmus test of that vagal tone. Okay. It's also a litmus test of our ANS system. Okay. How are we functioning? How are we doing? How well are we handling the stress the daily stress, whether it's training stress, okay, emotional stress, social stress, all those are factors. Okay, we cannot separate our world. Okay, so you can have a guy, doing really well at work, goes home, and has got, not a good home life, whatever that is, bad marriage, kids, new baby, all right, crying in the middle of the night. That adds to the stress. Okay, it's all cumulative. So we have to take those factors into account. So when we're looking at HRV, we're really looking at that segment R to R. Okay, nothing else. But we're looking at that in a time spectrum. Okay, what's the time between that R to R? Now, variability meaning that the time changes, it varies each beat. That's a sign of health, of a healthier individual. Okay, chronically, when it's not varied, when we're stressed, that's not a good sign. Okay, so at rest, if you don't have good variability, then you might have some issues that need to be dealt with, and then they'll go into the cardiologist to look at the ECG strips and do the real work from there. Okay, so what we're looking at here, let's see if I can reach around. Okay, so when we got these time segments, I don't know if you can see that, the different time segments here. Okay, what we're doing is we're looking at the delta of that. Okay, just make sure. So when someone says, oh, your HRV is 84, we're looking at this time minus this time, the delta, so it's 84. Okay, but notice how it could be changing. All right? But to get there, traditionally, because there's new research that's showing up, but traditionally, we need 300 consecutive beats. Okay, and that's the average. Okay, and we take that 300 consecutive beats, and then now we start seeing the time in between. But what happens as that 301 beat comes, number one falls off. So it's always 300 beats. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at HRV. Now there's new research coming out, and the devices aren't there yet, but they're getting it down. So let me back up. 300 beats equates to about 5 minutes, okay? Just roughly around that. Somebody at rest for about 5 minutes, that way you're cleaning up on the, hey, I just ran over here, I drank a cup of coffee and stuff. About 5 minutes. So they're getting it down closer to 2 minutes, even close to a minute with the same validity, all right? But again, that's fairly new this year, 2016, so there's still more work that needs to be done, but it's promising that, because if we can get a shorter time, then we have better compliance. So there's devices out there that can get this down that are relatively accurate, but understanding that we're just looking at that number. So what does that number mean? Okay, so you're going to go to your coach or your athlete and say, hey, yeah, his HRV was 84. What does that mean? And that's our problem, right? We get there, we did all this stuff and it's 84. That's good. Why is it good? Why is it bad? Okay, so that's what we need to look into. Okay, so when we break that down, we look at different segments. We have the primary are the high frequency and the low frequencies. Okay, so when we're looking at that, high frequency is less stressed, low frequency is a little bit more stressed, very low frequency is stressed. Okay, and then we have all the way on the other end, ultra low frequency. So in our population, performance population, whether it's military, tactical, or sport, we're really not concerned with this or even this too much. Okay, that is for the cardiologist. When people are high in these two areas, they have cardiac issues, like severe cardiac issues. So, I don't know if anybody here or knows somebody that, hey, yeah, they had to wear the 24-hour Holter for the cardiologist. People know people did. This is what they're looking at. This is exactly what the cardiologists are looking at. But now they're taking a big snapshot, 24 hours instead of, the 30 seconds in the primary care's office. Okay, so they're looking at the frequencies in each one of these things, and then also the ratio of that. For us, we're really looking more, I apologize over here, the low frequency, high frequency area, and as you'll see later, we'll look at the ratio of that as well. So what does that tell us? It's telling us how much time out of that segment we took, whether it's 5 minutes, 2 minutes, are we spending in these frequencies, okay? So if you look at, with the high frequency, that's when we're a little bit more parasympathetic, but that is exclusively a parasympathetic response, okay? So basically your vagus nerve is reacting in that sense. So we deactivate it, that's sympathetic. So technically we're parasympathetic until we inhibit that, and that becomes sympathetic, okay? So it kind of gets complicated because it's not, one doesn't turn on, one turns off. It doesn't work that way. What level of parasympathetic response do you have? The lower it has, the more we're calling it sympathetic. Does that make sense? So it's still one signaling, okay? So with that, you know, when you're looking at the low frequency, that still has a parasympathetic, but there's some sympathetic dominance going on. Okay, so if we're way up in our LF, that doesn't mean we're bad. It just means we got some stress going on. So if that's acute because it's a training load, or you know it's just one day from a night of binge drinking, whatever it is, okay. But if it's consistently that way and it's not going down, then we know we're having a tough time activating our parasympathetic response. Okay, so that's an indication. And then what interventions do you want to do for that? Okay, when we get very low frequency, as I said earlier, and we won't have too much of that, that is exclusively sympathetic. Okay, now depending on the population you work with, you might have folks that are okay electrophysiologically with their heart. However, their chronic stress became their new norm, and the very low frequency is a little bit higher than the average population. So you also have to look at that. What's the norm for this population? You don't have to accept it. You just have to identify or be aware of it. Okay? But where we really get down to is this low frequency, high frequency ratio. Okay? So that comes back to that point where, hey, we're always parasympathetic. It's just how much. So, you know, the ratio, so we want some sympathetic response in there. Unless we're sleeping, we want to be primarily parasympathetic, very high frequency. But when we're not sleeping, we don't want to be very high frequency for performance, okay? Because that person's going to be probably a little lackadaisical, all right? So with that, we look at that ratio. So that ratio is giving us what is, hey, this guy's optimal, this gal's optimal, okay? So they have a good balance, and that balance, or that blend is a moving target. So it's like a gas tank. So hey, something happens, I got to react. If it's a game, I'm responding to whatever's happening. If it's in a tactical environment, fire, you know, hey, we get out of the patrol car, approaching a stop. You know, hey, I want to be a little bit more sympathetic, right? I want a little bit more of my fight response in there. I want more awareness. Forget about what's going on. Just I want to focus. But as soon as I get that driver's license, things are good. At this, you know, safety's there. I want to be able to bounce back, get a little less stress, right? But I still need awareness. I still need situational awareness. Okay. If it's in a training environment, hey, I'm done. I attack the squat. I hit the 600 pounds. Not me, but anyway, 600 pounds. Then I get out. I don't want to still be jacked up, right? I need to calm down. So that's the ratio. That's the blending. You can ramp up when you need to, but ramp down when you need to. Okay? And that comes to recovery. So we're looking at that. That's where we're looking at, hey, how well are we recovering? How well are we handling the daily stresses, the chronic load, our training load, our work, our emotional, social, and environmental load. So that's what we're looking at that. So you can see on the left, you know, you're going to see somebody that's a little bit more with that low frequency up and that high frequency go. So they get some parasympathetic response in there, right? Poop, pops up, down. On the right, you'll see we can't get that. We're a little bit more stressed. We're staying there a little bit longer, okay? So in this area here, we get that little blip, and they come down. So still predominantly parasympathetic, predominantly sympathetic responses going on. And again, just these time domains. It's really not necessary to worry about the graph. I'm just trying to illustrate that we need some variability in there, okay, to be performing at an optimal level. So how do we look at our cognitive function? Okay, so heart rate variability has an effect on that, all right? So again, we have that cascading effect going on, and hormones are being released. Some of those hormones are also neurotransmitters, okay? And what's going on? So we know that there's an effect cognitively, and if you listen to Colonel Grossman's talk this morning, he illustrated with heart rate zones. But when we dive down deeper, this is what we're really looking at. So whether it's in the prefrontal cortex, DLPFC, or the motor cortex, which is your skill, and this is going to be more memory and cognition area here. Okay, how does it affect that? Well, we can measure that. And so a lot of these things, the funny thing is, earlier I told you about the dot probe matrix tasker, and then we're going to talk a little bit about DC potential. Everybody hear about DC potential? Okay, well, really they started looking at, when they investigated this in the psychophysiology world, it was really for learning disability, kids that were ADHD at the time, just hyperactive. At that time they didn't have the ADHD term yet. But that's what they started looking at. What's going on there that these people can't stay focused and they can't do this? So that's where the original research came from. And then we look at performance, and the performance more in astronauts and so forth on the DC potential. But what we're looking at here with that is, again, it's a direct current. So we're looking at the potentiation it's happening in every cell of your body. So the potentiation of that signaling going across from cell to cell, and we're measuring in millivolts, as you'll see a little bit later. But when you're positive, it's more of a relaxed state, okay, to a point. And that doesn't mean like cool, calm, and collective, but that means that you're not in a high stress area where you can't function, okay? And it's more, because we're talking cellular now, so we're talking about immune efficiency and even cellular efficiency within the cellular structure itself. But when we're looking at the strength of that signal. But when this positive relaxing gets a little bit too high, you actually become a little bit hyperactive, okay? Because there's more voltage going in. And it's hard to see over there. So when we're looking at that, just think of it as, so the DC potentials, we're measuring from that prefrontal cortex area, right? What we're measuring is the signaling strength. So think of it as the dimmer switch. If we dim the lights, all right, there's still power going to the lights, same amount of power, well, same power source, but the resistance is higher, so the amperage becomes low, right? So we have a higher resistance, so that can't get there to make the lights bright. It's a similar thing that's going on here, is, the brain's got the power, but you can't get the signal strength there. There's too much resistance. As we get stressed, all right, it's harder from that cell-to-cell communication, all right, that signaling to happen, so there's more resistance, so our cognitive function starts to decline, okay, in this scenario here. Now, where it comes into play in performance, all right, emotional stress is a big factor. Okay, you get pissed off, it's hard to reason with somebody, as Colonel Grossman said this morning. Well, that's because there's so much resistance there, it doesn't matter what you do. So your heart rate can increase that resistance. Your breathing rate can increase that resistance. Okay, so that's what happens over here. Okay, so when we're looking at chronic stress versus acute stress is when it's always there. Okay, I mean, we measure on any given day, we're seeing this. So in performance, we look at it like, 3 to 4 days in a row, we've got to do something. But usually in the military world, and even at least in the law enforcement with the SWAT teams, we're seeing it, lasting months and if not years. So there's issues with that. So again, the cascading effect from the brain-body connection is the endocrine system. We don't get the right amount of hormone release that we need, and the uptake and the aggregation of those hormones. So that's basically what we're looking at. So with acute stress, okay, again, it's go in the squat rack, hit the hole, get out. That's acute, that's okay. We can regulate that, right? So it doesn't last. Okay, so there's a lot of terms. It doesn't matter what technology you use. They use the red, yellow, green scheme. If you're always green, if I have an athlete that's always green, he's probably not training the right way, because you got to have some stress to get a response, right? But it's when that stress overtakes and we can't recover from it, that's when we run into problems. So you got to play a little bit. Every individual is different. They respond differently. So that's where the monitoring comes in. So this, again, I probably shouldn't even include this slide, but just understand back to how nutrition affects this. So you get a little, with dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, all right? We need sodium, potassium to execute that. So we could increase our resistance by not having enough. Having just a small imbalance could affect, when we get down to the millisecond part, go into a room, there's an unknown in there, shoot, no shoot situation, a small electrolyte imbalance could be critical, okay? And the same if it's, an EOD disposal unit. Again, fire rescue coming on a scene, first thing, is the scene safe? Okay, then proceed. Well, if you make a misjudgment there, that could be costly as well, right? I didn't see that, I was just focused on this. So just illustrating the many things that go into this, so when we look at these modern things, we're just thinking, hey, okay, this is HRV or whatever, because that's the biggest term out there now, but it's much more than that. So my message on that is you got to dig deeper before you give your interpretation, knowing what you're saying to the athlete to be relatively close. We're not going to be 100% accurate unless we start, okay, we're going to draw blood and all that stuff. We're not talking about doing that. But understand what's going on. Talk to the athlete or the operator, whoever. Talk to them, find out what's going on. If you know someone had a new baby, they're going to have some issues, and it's just being aware of that. And then, again, how's your diet? I mean, you're in a patrol car all the time, swing by a drive-through. I've been on some buy bus where, inevitably they always change the location, so you're sitting in this van for 6 hours, and it's like, oh, we're changing location. Okay, swing by the drive-through, get 15 burgers for the guys because they haven't eaten in a while. So it's things like that. So if that's always the problem, then we got to look at nutrition. Could affect all these other factors. Okay. And again, just looking at this, the reason why I have this slide is really more to look at the wavelengths, the model that you're seeing here. So again, we have the chronic stress response here, but we're never coming down. And here we come down. So what does this look like to you strength coaches out there? Supercompensation, right? So again, Saley's model comes from where? Psychology, all right? So that's why, it does apply. So the brain does not detach from the body, okay? So that physiological, hey, when we're training, we're doing periodization, how we're gonna do that, how we're gonna manipulate, whether it's block training, linear, it doesn't matter. It could even, whether it's high intensity, CrossFit, it doesn't matter. We always take this into account, right? Well, it's the same thing for our brain. Okay, we got to take that into account. So stress affects that. So physical stress from training, or whether it's tactical training or physical training, but emotional stress, social stress. What do I mean by social stress? Okay, expectations. Okay, so in the In the tactical world, it could be, especially for police fire, you've got all the people coming out of their houses. They want to see what's going on. All the lights are there. That's social stress. I got to manage this. I got to do this. If it's a, bless you, if it's a, a hostage situation, is everybody safe? Do we have a clean shot? All that stuff. That social stress comes on because what are those people thinking of you? In athletics, it's the family and the friends. Okay? Hey, you're my meal ticket. You got hurt. Okay? So, and in college, it's, you got your dorm mates that, live through you vicariously. Those are major factors. Okay? And in the military, it's all the cool guys, all spec ops guys, all right? And then they get, oh, okay, yeah, I'm spec op guy. That's social stress because now there's an expectation. And now they're kind of going to respond to that. That adds stress to those individuals. Whether they want to do it or not, there's a certain expectation when they're engaged in public, in these settings, and that adds that social stress. And then it kind of tags, if you're in here for Tim's talk, a little bit towards the end, we talked about PTSD. Okay, whether it doesn't matter what environment we're in with PTSD, that social stress is a factor with that. Okay, let's see how I'm doing on time here. So, just to tie that brain-body connection in again, okay, we got the HPA Axis, all right? And we'll just briefly go through it. Actually, this is a better of what's really going on. So hypothalamus is going to release hormone, right? That's going to go into the adrenal glands, okay, which is going to send a signal, ACTH, down to the kidneys, all right? And then what's happening, we're going to release cortisol or corticoids to the bloodstream. And then we have our stress response. Cortisol is our stress hormone. It's getting released in the bloodstream. And that's all through, whether it's physical stimulus, environmental stimulus, visual stimulus, auditory stimulus, that's what's happening. If we don't take care of recovering from that, that could mess that up, okay? So we look at, I don't know if it was talked before this or earlier, but on low testosterone. We're seeing a lot of low T. I think it might have been over in the other room when they're looking at concussions. So we got to be careful. Say, hey, is low T being caused from this stress? Or is it, hey, you have low T, but your performance is still high? Maybe that's the homeostasis that needs to be optimal. Because too much, maybe, we don't know that. But we have to think, we can't just say this and that. We've got to peel back that onion and look a little deeper. And it may be different for other people. I mean, there might be, hey, we didn't realize, but this guy, got blown up 3 years ago and he never told anybody, which does happen, okay? It's like, hey, I got up, I'm all good, I'll join my guys, and, I forgot about it because I got blown up, and then just go on their merry way. So just understanding how that cascading effect, how that cascading system works and how it affects the brain, okay, and performance. So ultimately performance, okay. So what we're really looking at here is, we have that efferent, afferent going up and down, okay, external to internal, okay, parasympathetic to sympathetic, that blending of, and then we're looking for that optimal level. And then, with DC potential, looking at that, that signaling. Are we too high? Are we optimal? Or are we too low stress? Okay. And then, again, how is it affecting our endocrine response? Because part of that, remember, those hormones, some of those hormones also act as neurotransmitters. Okay. And not only the hormones might be there, they might be releasing the right way and everything, the right levels, but now also we're not aggregating it, okay? Or in the case of low T, which is one of the theories out there, it's really not low T, it's just you guys are very good at aggregating the testosterone that you're using it because you're still performing at a high level. So maybe you're using it and it's just not sitting in your resting blood, So it's those things that we have to look at. Now, nobody's there yet to say, yes, absolutely it's this, but that's where we're looking, okay? What is optimal? But just the monitoring itself, okay, that alone we just got to be careful with that information, okay? So when we look at different devices, I'm going to skip this next slide because it really just talks about the signaling again and where we go. And I think I've probably belabored that point for you guys. But there's different monitoring devices out there. You know, like the Omega Waves, the BioForce, the iFleet, the M-Wave 2, which is the bottom one there. So they're all good in some respects, and they all have flaws, okay? But clinically, you know, you need to be better than that. But we're not clinical, we're applied, right? We're out in the field. I can't have my guy, okay, lay down, we'll put, you know, 12 leads on you, just lay there for a while, you know, before they go in the weight room, right? It doesn't make sense. So there's ways we can monitor things at home. Now, we talked about HRV. What do we need for an HRV? QRS complex. We need a full complex. So we have devices here that do not give that, like the BioForce, iFleet, and so forth, the M-Wave, they don't do that. So they use a different algorithm. It's not totally, hey, don't bother using it because it's not a QRS. Well, it's not HRV. However, it does give us something, right? So it's what they call HBV, heartbeat variability, because that's what it's measuring. Okay, it's measuring heartbeat variability. Well, we could still use that to our advantage. It's awareness. The Omega Wave is going to be, and there's a this is a self-monitoring device, so that one will use a complex and it'll give us HRV. And it'll also break down to the other, well, it's SDNN or root mean square, however algorithms. And then you have some little more comprehensive devices like Zephyr or Hidalgo, those things that can measure HRV with the QRS complex and respiration and skin temp and things like that. Well, that's a little bit more complex and takes a lot more work on this. But these devices give you the ability to take a snapshot, but what I'm cautioning you on is not to come to conclusions right away. Start, okay, I see this, now let me see why. If you're green, okay, why are you green? If you're red, why are you red? If you're always doing really good, you're optimal every day, which is doubtful, you're probably doing something wrong, but why? And then, you know, whether you need to intervene or not. So it's not just about the load, the volume, the training, and all that stuff. Remember, it's about all the other things that come with it, including recovery. Okay, so what recovery methods are we going to use? If I have somebody that's highly sympathetic chronically, I really don't want to throw them into an ice bath because, you know, they're going to be sympathetic for sure there. So maybe it's a float, maybe it's a massage, maybe it's acupuncture, okay? So the alternative medicines are very good at helping us regulate this, okay, the HRV aspect of it. Meditation, yoga, mindfulness, those things have been shown to be very effective. And there's a lot more research going on, which hopefully in the years to come here soon, they'll get out there that they are being able to objectively quantify some of those things. Before, it's mostly qualitative data. So they're getting a little bit deeper with that. But those things are very helpful so these devices help us decide which method is probably more appropriate at that time. Okay, is everybody following that? So with that, Big's message, okay, got that brain-body connection, HRV and DC potential is really giving us our state of readiness. And for that, recovery is our optimal, how well we recover is our optimal state of readiness. So that's the thing that you need to take away. And the other thing, like I said earlier, is the information that you're getting from this, be careful on how you deliver it, okay? You got to give the so what. Well, be pretty close to knowing what that so what is. Reach out to your network. There's plenty of things, you know, today's day and age, we don't lack information. There's something always at our fingertips. Not always accurate, but if you can verify some of the sources, you probably can get a better accurate thing. But just don't go, hey, and I'll tell you with any of these devices, We have a bunch at our place, and we use all different ones just to validate which ones are better than others. But we never take them at face value because that's the proprietary, that's the company saying, hey, this is what it means. I want to validate, does that what it means to our population? Okay, sometimes it takes a long time for us to do, but we don't take it at face value. We don't discard it, but again, what's the so what? Why? Why is it saying he's red? You know? And just so I encourage you to dig into that a little bit more. So when you're delivering your information to the end user, whoever that is, that you have those caveats with you. Yeah, he's red, but you know what? Everything else looks good. I'm not concerned about it. 3 days later, he's still red. Hey, we're a little concerned. And this is why, because you've looked into it.